It's missing something, isn't it? Everything just looks much better when filmed with an anamorphic lens, doesn't it? Who doesn't want their videos to look more cinematic? Even the most mundane object filmed in the panoramic aspect ratio with the oval bokeh, the characteristic distortion and the epic lens flares just looks so much better. Traditionally, this look was achievable only by using extremely expensive lenses from big manufacturers like Arri, Cooke or Zeiss. Fortunately, these days it can be achieved for much less, and I will show you how. Starting with true but still fairly affordable anamorphic lenses and moving towards even more affordable options all the way up to faking it on a budget. Anamorphic lenses were introduced to squeeze more information onto a standard film frame. They do it by horizontally compressing the image, which used to be later decompressed by a similar projector lens in a cinema. It created this widescreen look, which we still associate with the epic Hollywood movies. That's why the anamorphic look is still relevant, even in the digital age. It just reminds us of the big blockbuster movies. It is the very definition of cinematic. The landscape changed a few years back when some manufacturers brought affordable anamorphic lenses to the market. Leading producers of these kind of lenses are Sirui and Laowa, and they are available for most modern lens mounts and almost all of the sensor sizes, from micro four thirds through APS-C all the way up to full frame. They are convenient, have great quality, and they just work as they should. The only downside of them, I would say, is that, like with any other prime lenses, you have to buy a set to cover different focal lengths. But there is a way to use your existing set of lenses and make them anamorphic. Anamorphic adapters. These are optical units mounted in front of a lens, and they add the anamorphic squeeze, oval bokeh and the lens flares to the image. They are not as convenient to use as dedicated anamorphic lenses, but you can still achieve decent results with them, and you don't have to buy a whole new set of lenses. Bear in mind, they usually work much better with prime lenses, and also make sure they are compatible with the lenses you own. But imagine the possibilities. You can even make your vintage lenses anamorphic. There are plenty of manufacturers to choose from. There is SLR Magic, there is Sirui, Moment, Great Joy, Blazar, to name a few. Besides those high-quality modern anamorphic adapters, there are also vintage anamorphic adapters. You can get some of them fairly cheap, but the tricky part with them is that they weren't designed to film with them. These are mostly projector lenses used in cinemas to, well, project anamorphic movies. So they don't often come with any widely used lens mount and require quite a lot of DIY to make them actually work on a modern camera. I don't have one with me right now, but I had some first-hand experience with using it both on digital and even on film camera. And I wouldn't do it again, as it was an extremely clunky setup. But I know that if you commit to mastering a rig based on a specific adapter, you can get great results with it. But considering how relatively affordable the modern anamorphic lenses and the modern adapters are, I don't really see a point in doing it to yourself. Unless you like tinkering with your rig, then it can be an amazing DIY project. Speaking of DIY projects, you can modify an older lens to mimic some of the anamorphic features. Especially popular for these kinds of modifications are vintage lenses like Helios's or Jupiter's. I have a modified Helios 44-2 with me today, and it has a 3D printed insert inside which makes the bokeh oval, and there is also a piece of string inside which renders a horizontal flare, almost like on a true anamorphic lens. It also has an added focus and aperture gears and this rather classy metal lens hood to make it more suitable for filming. But in its core, it's still a 50-year-old vintage Soviet lens. And I bought it as is with all those modifications, and you can do it too if, like me, you're not that good with DIY. The pros of using modified lenses is that they can be fairly cheap and their results are acceptable. Also, you don't have to use any de-squeeze feature in your camera because the image coming from them is not distorted. Also, those old vintage lenses, they have tons of character on their own. The anamorphic insert is kind of a filter, but mounted inside a lens, which brings us to filters mounted in front of a lens. This comes down mostly to streak filters, which when mounted on a lens will make your strong highlights create this sort of anamorphic lens flare effect. Be careful with it though, as it will be quite a strong effect. To make the streak filter effect more believable, you can enhance it with some post-production magic, like adding an anamorphic crop. But cropping the footage to the CinemaScope aspect ratio is not the only thing that we can do to make our regular footage look as if it was shot with an anamorphic lens. Next, we can add a barrel distortion, which is fortunately a rather simple effect to achieve. We can enhance it further by adding those horizontal lens flares. It is usually done using a specialized plugin like Optical Flares or Null Light Factory, but you can sort of achieve this effect using any editing or compositing software. The final touch would be creating the oval bokeh, but at the moment there are no quick solutions for it. It would be a very laborious process involving creating masks and separating background and blurring just the background in each shot separately. So not worth it in my opinion. And final thing, when filming, don't forget to turn on the panoramic crop marks in your camera so you can film with the crop in mind. So, let's assume you want to film with an anamorphic lens. Which cameras are good for it? Of course, you can use any camera with suitable lens mount. You can even mount an anamorphic adapter on a camcorder. But there are some camera bodies with features dedicated to anamorphic filming. Besides the high-end cinema cameras, there are some mirrorless bodies on the market which have the anamorphic de-squeeze built in. Those can be Sony FX3 or Sony FX30 or the Panasonic GH5 or 6 or the full-frame Panasonic S-Line, for example. This way, you don't have to use an external monitor to see your footage with the correct aspect ratio. With other cameras, you may need to use an external monitor with the de-squeeze feature, but that will of course make the whole setup bigger and much heavier. The Panasonic cameras, they are especially good for filming with anamorphic lenses, as even the sensor stabilization will work well in that case. Anamorphic lenses are specialized tools, so it might not be worth investing in new ones. Why not buy used and save some money to hire an actor for your next short film? All of these anamorphic lenses and modern anamorphic adapters you can get used, checked and for less than new from MPB. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it already, and see you next time.